For my project, I will be talking about A Clockwork Orange, written by Anthony Burgess in 1962. It's very controversial because of its explicit themes. It revolves around Alex, who is, I believe, 17 when the book starts, and his three teenage friends, who a little bit older but still teenagers, that run around London at night drinking, breaking and entering, destroying property, raping young women, and beating up homeless people, and just other cruel, violent acts such as that. Um, the book didn't receive challenges until 1973, which was 2 years after the film adaptation of the book was released. And that's probably why the challenges started being raised then, because more people and a wider audience were able to watch the film and be exposed to the film before the novel, and were therefore able to raise concerns about the content. The first challenge that did come in 1973 happened in Orem, Utah. According to a post by the Carnegie Mellon University blog site, a bookseller was arrested for selling three unfavorable books, one of which was A Clockwork Orange. Even though these charges against her were dropped, she was still forced to relocate and close down her store. And then, according to the American Library Association, or the ALA, the novel faced three other challenges in 1976 and 1977. The book was removed from high schools in Colorado and Massachusetts due to its objectionable language. And then finally, in 1982, it was removed from two high school libraries in Alabama, but were later reinstated on a stricter basis. I definitely see why this book has been banned. There are a lot of very explicit themes and events that I mentioned earlier that happen, but at the end of the book, the characters don't really face any consequences. Um, Alex does get captured by the police at one point and gets sent to a brainwashing conditioning facility to try and make him and force him to be good. But by the end of the novel, the consequences and the side effects of his conditioning are completely gone, and he doesn't suffer from it anymore as he did earlier in the book. And his friends, meanwhile, who were never captured, were never conditioned, go on to lead very quiet lifestyles. One becomes a cop, one gets married, but none of them have to deal with the retributions of their actions. I definitely see that high schools would be wary of putting this into their curriculum. I do generally disagree with censorship and banning, but I think that it makes sense when you have younger, more impressionable kids who are reading this in high schools who see these violent acts happening but no consequences because of it. The reason I chose this prompt, besides just wanting to talk about the book, was because the ending is something I feel especially strongly about, or rather, very strongly about changing. I have read the book multiple times and I'm still disappointed by it because I don't think it makes sense for such a strongly violent protagonist. By that, I mean Alex was so openly violent and cruel throughout the entire novel, and also sometimes towards his friends. He was a very big aggressor, and in the course of a year, after his brainwashing, after all of that, he gets a new gang who also does violent acts, but he's tired of his crime ridden lifestyle and he no longer feels like participating in the violence that he used to. Everything that happened previously in the novel was basically explained away in the last chapter by saying that this sudden, very profound attitude change was simply because he was growing up and maturing. The novel only happens within the course of a year from the time Alex is, maybe 2 years from the time Alex is 16 or 17 until the time he is 18. So I don't really buy that he all of a sudden is feeling mature. And it's not because of the social conditioning or brainwashing either, because, as I said, by the end of it, all of the consequences and all mention of it is completely gone from the last chapter. The point of the novel, according to the author himself, was to say that, quote, it is better to be bad of one's own free will than to be good from scientific brainwashing. The title itself deals with this. A clockwork orange means taking a natural thing, the orange, and making it unnatural by mixing it with machinery or clockwork, cogs, stuff like that. Um, and for this, it makes sense with Alex because in Alex's case, he was a natural human being acting out of his own free will, and they added brainwashing and conditioning to him and making him unnatural, much like A Clockwork Orange. I'm not saying that the ending doesn't make sense with the theme because I definitely believe it does, but I think it's sort of lackluster in an otherwise great book. I don't think it's believable for Alex's character and having to deal with his actions throughout the novel. And I do think that I have a solution for the ending that um, would satisfy Burgess's message of free will over scientific brainwashing and still being able to get his point across, but still making the novel with a better ending and something that would make more sense for Alex as a character. I really like, for example, what I'm going off of is kind of like Brave New World. I think all of the characters in that book, their endings made sense according to their personalities. For example, John, who participates in self flagellation, dies tragically and suddenly, which I think is very fitting for his character's sense of punishment and passion and kind of this flair for the dramatic that he gets from Shakespeare. I think a significant, hard hitting ending like that would be a lot more impactful on readers if it was in A Clockwork Orange. In my perfect ending of the novel, Alex is not a calm, maturing adult. I think it would have been much more interesting and meaningful to see maybe his old friends act that way by the end of the book. And then Alex, meanwhile, I think should have still been facing the consequences of his conditioning and would be psychologically affected by that in an asylum, something like that, by the end of the novel. I think this could work for multiple reasons. The reason it works for Alex's friends is because they did not experience the brainwashing that Alex did. They are a little bit older, so the transition from 18 to 20 is a little bit better than the transition from 16, 17 to 18, that sort of thing. And because they didn't have to experience the conditioning, they were able to kind of find their maturity naturally, like a orange untouched by clockwork, and they would have ended up fine. And that would have gone along with Burgess's theme, saying that their free will and their ability to keep their free will was better for them developmentally. For Alex's case, it would make a lot more sense that he was psychologically affected by this conditioning and brainwashing, and that it would have lasted on until the end of the book. That would also have gone along with the theme because he was a natural person that was affected by that unnatural conditioning and brainwashing and therefore faced long lasting effects because of it. In my ending of the story, he didn't face long lasting effects of it by the end of the story, which I think almost defeats Burgess's point because it was still his free will in the end that allowed him to make his own choices, and everyone just got basically what they wanted. If Alex was psychologically affected in an asylum, something like that, by the end of the novel, it would have gotten the point across that because he wasn't able to have free will, he was very developmentally harmed, while his friends who didn't get the brainwashing were able to develop naturally and find a place for themselves where Alex would not have in my ending. And that is my presentation.